Ruka. 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 Hello guys, Ancient Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. So as for today's video, once again I'm recording outside because it's 31 degrees here outside, 31, and my room is hotter than here, so it must be like 35 degrees in there. I'm just sweating just by sitting there, and I have a fan blowing wind to my back, and still I'm sweating. That's how hot it is. As for today's video, we have the RX 580 versus the RX 5500 XT versus the RTX 3050. And the purpose of this video is not actually for people trying to get new GPUs, but for people trying to upgrade. Because people trying to upgrade, they actually have several options. For example, people having the RX 580, they actually have the 5500 XT used as an option, and they have the 3050, and they also have, for example, the 6500 XT, as you can see in this video as well, the RX 580, 5500 XT and 6500 XT also here, or even people with the 5500 XT and they just want to change to Nvidia, so they are picking the lowest end Nvidia they can get, in this case from the 3000 series, which is the 3050, and that's why I'm making this video, for you guys to actually see if it is actually worth or not to upgrade to the 3050 if you have the RX 580 or the 5500 XT. That's all. And well guys, let's go to the benchmarks, right after the sponsor of today's video. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, where using my SKG discount code leads to a 25% off across several products, making a Windows 10 serial key only $16. After the payment, you'll receive the key in your account, and all you need to do is to introduce it in your Windows settings, and bam! You have an activated system. Today's first game is Assassin's Creed Valhalla using very high settings. At 1080p, the 5500 XT results are uncomfortably close to the 3050 ones. I mean, the 3050 is one generation above and consumes more power, yet it only delivers 5 average FPS more at 1080p. At 1440p, the difference percentage-wise gets higher or bigger, but the FPS difference is around the same 5 average FPS, which makes the 3050 look really bad in this scenario, even with the old 580 being able to push over 30 average FPS. At 4K, we get the so-called console experience with the 3050, the cinematic experience with the 5500 XT, and the human eye can see more than 20 FPS experience with the RX 580. Gears 5 is the next on the list using ultra settings. This game favors the Nvidia GPUs considerably, and now we see a decent difference in between the 3050 and the 5500 XT, at least to compensate the higher power draw. At 1080p we can see that the 3050 is around 40% faster than the 580, but costs almost double of what the 580 was being bought for 1 year after its release. So yeah, at 1440p the 3050 is the only card being able to achieve over 50 average FPS, with all of them being over 30, even the old 580. And at 4K, well, we get a beautiful PowerPoint presentation given by someone that's really slow at changing slides, with even the 3050 not reaching 30 average FPS.
Hole hidden behind that poster that leads to the real world. We all feel safe in that room. But sometimes something crawls out from behind the poster. And the ones that see it happen freak out.
Control is another game where Nvidia GPUs tend to strive, and we can see that from the results at 1080p, where the 3050 is considerably faster than the 5500 XT, as it should always be, delivering almost 80 average FPS while the 5500 XT can't even reach 60. Going to 1440p, it comes to my mind that maybe it isn't actually the 3050 that is just way faster in this game, but the 5500 XT that's slower, because at 1440p the RX 580 actually delivers higher performance than the 5500 XT, which is quite odd. At 4K, all cards perform like an early 2000s computer running Need for Speed Underground 2, although none of these cards were aimed at 1440p, so let alone 4K. Now with Horizon Zero Dawn using ultra settings as well. At 1080p the 3050 is obviously dominating, as it should once again, with 15 average FPS over the 5500 XT and 30 over the 580. At 1440p the 3050 still manages to achieve 60 average FPS, with the 5500 XT going a bit below 50, but since this card is a generation behind and consumes less power, I can say that the results are far from being bad. But you may want to upgrade to something faster in this scenario. At 4K the 3050 manages the console experience once again, while the other two cards are just delivering a handful of frames. Yeah. In Red Dead Redemption 2, we have the same scenario as in some games before, where the RX 580 delivers close to the 5500 XT performance. Still, one consumes 165 watts and the other 100 watts, so that also counts. Although for this game in particular, people thinking of getting the 5500 XT won't get any noticeable gains here, apart from that same reduced power draw, of course. At 1440p, the 5500 XT is once again barely ahead of the RX 580, and the 3050 still handles its own pretty well at around 55 average FPS. And it is only at 4K that it goes down to 32, which is definitely not my thing, but can be playable to a certain extent if you have FreeSync, for example, and game more than 1 meter away from your monitor. Forza Horizon 5 is a game where AMD GPUs tend to flex like crazy, and here you can see why. Even the old and less power-hungry 5500 XT stays only 5 average FPS behind the RTX 3050 at 1080p, which is nothing less than impressive from a GPU that should be way slower than the 3050. But well, even the RX 580 is going to 50 at 1080p Ultra, which is also impressive. As we increase the resolution to 1440p, the 3050 gets really close to 60 average FPS, while the 5500 XT still handles 51, and the older G-Dog 580 41. And even at 4K the results are okay, I guess, with all cards delivering over 30 average FPS, or at least close to, which is the minimum of the minimums you need to play a game, at least decently. If you're still playing Rainbow Six Siege, then good news, because even your RX 580 will be able to handle over 170 average FPS at 1080p Ultra, with the 5500 XT pushing them really close to 200 and the 3050 having higher 1% lows than the 5500 XT has on averages. At 1440p things get harder for the older cards, but they are still delivering over 100 average FPS. It is only at 4K that the results tank for all cards, but even more for the AMD ones, where not even 60 average FPS is achievable unless you decrease some graphic options, with the 3050 being able to push 75, which is still nothing impressive for a new generation card.
Proceed to customs without undue delay.
Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that takes a toll on all GPUs as the resolution goes up, but at 1080p even the 3050 can achieve over 75 average FPS, with both the 5500 XT and the 580 showing their age. Still, this game is one of those where the 5500 XT is only mildly faster than the 580, which shouldn't happen, but once again, it consumes around 65 watts less, so it's debatable, I guess. At 1440p, both AMD cards struggle to get even close to 30 FPS, while the 3050 brings a way smoother experience. And at 4K, any gameplay in any of these cards is just visual pollution.
Can be a little rough. Move around a bit to make sure you didn't break anything.
Call of Duty Warzone is a vastly played title, so I guess it couldn't be missing. Although take in consideration that for proper testing methodology I am using the orientation mission, as in normal gameplay most people will be certainly CPU or RAM bottlenecked, or even both. At 1080p we have again one of those games where the 3050 just gets humiliated. I mean, it's a newer generation card that's way more expensive in terms of both MSRP and real pricing, and yet it is delivering virtually the same performance as an old generation GPU that consumes way less power. Even the RX 580 is closer than it should ever be. At 1440p things stay the same, with the 5500 XT being really close to the 3050 and the 580 still delivering 70 average FPS. And surprise surprise, even at 4K things didn't change. This could mean that the AMD cards are really well optimized for this game engine, or that Nvidia ones aren't. Who knows? Getting closer to the final line, we have Resident Evil Village using max settings and no ray tracing. RE Engine is another game engine where AMD GPUs perform really well, but it seems that in this case the Nvidia GPU performs faster than the older AMD ones. At 1440p the 3050 is around 10 average FPS faster than the 5500 XT, delivering up to 66 average FPS, and the RX 580 still achieves almost 50, which is great for a card as old as this one. At 4K the results tank quite a lot, with none of the AMD cards delivering over 30 average FPS, and with even the 3050 struggling to deliver 35. Now for today's last game we have God of War using high settings. Once again I was sincerely expecting more performance from a GPU of the current generation that is both more expensive and consumes more power. And not just these 10 average FPS at 1080p. At 1440p the results stay more or less within the same pattern, and the 3050 is the only card being able to get even close to 50 average FPS, while both AMD cards struggle to reach 40. And if we raise the resolution to 1440p ultra-wide, we see that these results are far from optimal for all cards. But taking in consideration the age and power draw, the AMD cards still do a good job. Well, it seems that the price-performance ratio nowadays is definitely not what it used to be. Let's move to the conclusion. So guys, as for the conclusion, well, the conclusion is fairly easy. I mean, if you have the RX 580, maybe you should be upgrading to the 3050, but I still would advise you to get the 6500 XT if you have a PCI Express 4 CPU and motherboard, because it is way cheaper than the 3050. It won't perform as good as the 3050, but in some scenarios it will be quite faster than the 5500 XT, while consuming, let's say, from 70 to 90 watts, which is quite good, and it is fairly cheap and way cheaper than the 3050 once again. But if you want to go to the 3050 pricing, maybe you should consider the 6600 non-XT. As you can see in this video, I have the 6600 versus the RTX 3050 as well, and you can see that for the same price or sometimes even cheaper, the 6600 will outperform the RTX 3050 in almost any scenario. So that's the card I would advise if you want to upgrade from even the RX 580, well, go to the RX 6600. If you can't spend that money, then maybe the 6500 XT is an option. And if you want a real upgrade, then no, do not go with the 3050. That's my advice. If you have the RX 580 or the 5500 XT, don't go with the 3050, because for that price you can get the 6600 non-XT, which is way better. But if you want, well, that's your choice. You will still get better performance, just not $300 better. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next one, which will be the testing of the 3 official DLSS to FSR 2.0 modes. Official mods. So not modes, mods. So yeah, that's my cats eating some grass. Anyway, see you in the next video, guys.